From the moment I was born, I knew our clan had produced a noble consort who reigned supreme in the imperial harem. It was said the emperor adored her deeply, and after her untimely death, every favored consort bore some resemblance to her in their features. As I grew older, my clansmen made a startling discovery. Not only did my appearance mirror hers, but my temperament was identical as well. They all whispered that the Song family was destined to produce another noble consort. The night before I was sent to the capital, Mother held me tightly, weeping bitterly. They say the palace is a place that devours people without spitting out their bones. Your aunt's favor was merely a facade of glory, or she wouldn't have perished so young. Why must you leap into such an abyss? Of course, I knew all this, because in my previous life, I had met a tragic end within those deep palace walls. Since birth, I've never been one to cry or fuss, for I was born with the memories of my past life. By a strange coincidence, I was reborn into the same family both times. However, in my former life, I was the first daughter of the estate of Earl Ningyuan, while this time, I hail from a low-ranking official's family, merely a branch of the Earl's illegitimate line. From the moment I was born, I knew our clan had produced a noble consort who reigned supreme in the imperial harem. The estate of Earl Ningyuan had produced only one noble consort among its mediocre descendants, bringing honor to the entire family. However, though the noble consort was deeply favored, she passed away before I was born. It was said that the emperor loved her dearly, and after her demise, every favored consort by his side bore some resemblance to her in their eyes and brows. The primary mother of the earl's estate could no longer contain herself, and, under the guise of the old lady's birthday banquet, began searching among the clan for a girl who resembled the noble consort. At 5 years old, I was led by Mother through the gates of the estate of Earl Ningyuan, with no one to guide us. Mother lost her way in the vast mansion. She grew so anxious that sweat beaded on her temples. Your father couldn't come due to his duties, and now I'm late for the old lady's birthday celebration. This will surely get your father blamed along with me. I pointed to a small path and said in my childish voice, "Mother, there's another way over there." Taking that path, Mother quickly reached the main hall. She patted my head. "Our Meyer is so clever to find the right way so quickly." It wasn't that I was clever. It's just that I grew up here in my previous life, so I naturally remember the way. I recognized my birth mother from my past life at a glance. She is still the matriarch of the estate of Earl Ningyuan, appearing as dignified and elegant as ever. Even though her most beloved daughter is gone, not a single strand of white hair has appeared at her temples. She remains radiant. She surveyed the young ladies of the clan, her brow slightly furrowed. They were all common and plain, far inferior to Muyao. My mother led me forward to pay respects, but I wasn't recognized. Instead, it was Mama Zhao standing nearby, who looked astonished. This young lady looks exactly like the young mistress did when she was a child, as if carved from the same mold. My birth mother from my past life only glanced at me briefly before indifferently shifting her gaze away. Of course, her eyes were only on my good, for nothing younger brother. I was raised by the wet nurse in this state. What I looked like as a child, she naturally doesn't remember and doesn't care. All she cares about is whether this estate can produce another noble consort to pave the way for her son's future. In my previous life, I had shallow bonds with family, but in this lifetime, I finally have a mother who genuinely loves me. I tugged at Mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mother, let's go." After presenting the birthday gifts, Mother and I were seated in the side hall. Everyone sitting in the side hall were unfamiliar faces I hadn't seen in my past life. With even the servants serving tea being few, I quietly ate the pastries Mother handed me, listening to the women in the side hall chattering away. Did you see earlier? The estate of Earl Ningyuan truly puts on such a grand display. Even His Majesty sent birthday gifts to the elderly madam. His Majesty remembers old affections. Even though noble consort Ro is gone, he still treats her family generously. Such fortune is something families like ours couldn't obtain in several lifetimes. I sneered inwardly. The favor Shen Yi showed me was nothing but arsenic coated in honey. When I was still alive in my previous life, my reputation wasn't good. Everyone in the capital knew that the emperor and empress were deeply devoted to each other, while I was merely a seductive consort who came between them. Although I was born with striking beauty, I wasn't particularly favored when I first entered the palace. It wasn't until Shen Yi discovered that the more he favored me, the more jealous the empress became. Whenever the empress was upset with him, he would always summon me to his chambers. Within a few days, the empress would relent. In Shen Ye's eyes, I wasn't even a substitute, just a beautiful plaything to provoke the empress's jealousy. Yet at that time, I treated him with utter sincerity, and over time, he inevitably developed genuine feelings for this plaything. Once, during a hunt, an assassin struck, and without a second thought, I shielded Shen Yi, taking the blow for him. An arrow pierced my chest, and Shen Yi carried my blood-soaked body back to the palace. In my hazy state of consciousness, Shen Yi gripped my hand, his voice trembling as he said to me, "Io, once you recover, let's start over." Before, in moments of passion, he only called me Rower. This was the first time he had ever called me Io. However, I didn't grasp the meaning behind his words. After I fully recovered, Shen Yi issued an edict promoting me to Consort Row, and the imperial kitchen staff was replaced entirely. After 2 years in the palace without conceiving, I was diagnosed with pregnancy shortly after being granted the title of consort. I was overjoyed, eagerly awaiting the birth of my child, thinking I would finally have someone to rely on in this deep palace. But in the end, I suffered a premature birth and severe bleeding, and the child did not survive. After the miscarriage, I would dream every night of the child's blue and purple body, waking up crying from the nightmares. Gradually, my mind began to deteriorate after losing my child. Everyone thought I would incur Shen Ye's disgust, but instead, he showed even more compassion toward me. In my madness, I cried and screamed, clawing deep scratches across Shen Ye's face. Yet he only held me tightly in his arms, soothing me with guilt-filled eyes. "Io, childbirth is too painful. Let's never have children again." Though I had no children, I was exceptionally promoted to noble consort. The noble consort, favor above all in the harem, yet sometimes lucid, sometimes mad. My madness was kept a secret. Shen Yi often came to visit me, his face frequently marked with scratches. He merely told his ministers he had adopted a mischievous kitten. During my lucid moments, I could sense the depth of his affection for me, yet his profound love became my death warrant. The empress had accompanied Shen Yi all the way to the throne, but gradually, she faded from his sight. Even as my mind grew increasingly clouded, Shen Ye's devotion to me never waned. No matter how virtuously she pretended to be, she could no longer tolerate my presence. As time went on, my moments of clarity became fewer and farther between. In one such clear moment, I gazed at a butterfly outside the windowsill and murmured, "Flower, flowers." A maid smiled at me and said, "Does the noble consort wish to see the flowers? The servant will take you to the garden." I seldom ventured out, but that day, I chased the butterfly right out of my bedchamber. I wasn't completely lost to madness. When I encountered the empress admiring flowers with the second prince in the imperial garden, I still remembered to pay my respects. The empress greeted me with a gentle smile, but her words were laced with venom. "So the noble consort has finally come to her senses. There are some matters I won't discuss with you now, but if I don't, you might never know them in this lifetime. You probably aren't aware, dear sister, that your majesty's favor towards you was merely to make me jealous. Knowing how much I despise you, to reassure me, he had cold medicine added to your daily meals. Your body was long rendered unfit for childbirth, which is why despite all those tonics you drank later, you still gave birth to a stillborn. You don't actually believe His Majesty truly cherishes you, do you? Even your title, Noble Consort Row, is derived from my childhood nickname. You, the gentle noble consort, are nothing but a joke. Seeing me in this state, the Empress must be feeling quite triumphant, yet her gaze towards me was filled with nothing but hatred. The mama, by her side, held down my hand, took a golden hairpin from my hair, and handed it to her. Holding the golden hairpin, she directly and fiercely slashed it across her own son's arm. The child's cries jolted me back to full awareness. They finally released me. The guards slowly drew their swords, the cold gleam of the blades reflecting my pallid profile. I collapsed onto the floor, lifting my gaze to ask her, "Your Majesty the Empress must have been scheming for a long time to eliminate me, haven't you?" She slowly bent down, smiling at me as she said, "Initially, I had no intention of taking your life. I merely added some mind-altering drugs to the scented balm you use daily. Yet even so, you remained far too conspicuous." Staring at the blood-stained golden hairpin before me, I asked in a trembling voice, "I won't survive today, will I?" The Empress straightened up, looking down at me from above with a sinister smile. "Allowing a wretch like you to live until today is already a stroke of good fortune for you." Before she could finish her words, she suddenly let out a piercing scream. I picked up the golden hairpin from the ground and thrust it fiercely toward her. Chaos erupted all around, with incessant clamor filling the air. A blade pierced through my chest, and I fell to the ground. Through the haze of blood before my eyes, I saw Shun Yi rushing toward me in a panic. The Empress clutched her face, blood continuously seeping through her fingers. The mama beside her quickly reacted, holding the 2-year-old second prince as she knelt before Shun Yi. "Your Majesty." The noble consort suddenly went mad, attempting to assassinate the Empress and the prince. Shun Yi didn't even glance at them, kneeling on the ground while holding me. He ordered someone to summon the imperial physician, his voice nearly torn with desperation. He held me so tightly that my entire body ached. My body temperature steadily dropped with the blood gushing from my chest. Thankfully, the pain soon faded away. I died, yet I did not truly perish. I was reincarnated, becoming human once more. In this life, I have the love of both parents, free from the burden of being a noble lady expected to bring glory to the family, and I can grow up without constraints. If I had no memories of my past life, I might have married a virtuous husband as mother wished, devoted to family life and living an ordinary existence. Yet, I simply cannot forget the hatred from my previous life. My former self, along with my child, who never had the chance to live, have long since decayed in their graves. Yet the one who caused our deaths is still living well within the palace. As I grew older, those memories became clearer, and my features blossomed into exceptional beauty. Mother began to worry and started discussing my marriage prospects with father. "Once Mayor comes of age, we should have her married off. You've always doted on our daughter the most. How can you bear to let her marry? Mayor has grown too beautiful. If the people from the estate of Earl Ningyuan were to see her, I also hope she can marry into a good family soon." Father sighed. "To be honest with you, Prefect Gua has approached me several times in private, saying his son has taken a liking to our mayor and wants to take her as a concubine." Prefect Gua's son? That good? For nothing? Wanting mayor to be his concubine? Absolutely impossible. Don't worry, my dear. The prefect has brought it up several times, but I've refused every time. When I entered the room carrying soup, my parents suddenly fell silent. I asked softly, "Father is just an archivist. What would Prefect Guo want with you?" Father picked up a steam bun and took a bite, saying casually, "It's nothing serious. All these years, Father has just been a dutiful minor official, naturally unaware of the dirty tricks in the official circles. He thought that by refusing the prefect's offers, I could escape this fate. In the eyes of those people, we are nothing but ants." The next day, as soon as I stepped out of the embroidery shop, Guo Sheng stopped me. "You don't really think that with your father's protection, you can escape my grasp, do you?" I showed no panic on my face, just stood there quietly watching him. Why is young Master Guo in such a hurry? With my humble background, how could I possibly refuse you? Guo Sheng laughed upon hearing this. "You're smarter than your father. I had him thrown into prison and beaten twice, yet he still wouldn't agree to let me marry you." I clenched my fingers tightly, staring at him intently. "I'm willing to marry you. Can you release my father? Of course. Once you come of age, I will send someone to propose marriage. He narrowed his eyes, his gaze wandering over me, a slimy look that made me sick. Don't worry, I'll treat you well after you marry me. He raised his hand to touch my face, but I subtly avoided it. I smiled at him. I originally had other choices, but you forced me onto this path. He didn't understand the meaning behind my words. However, Guosheng, seeing that I was being sensible, promised not to disturb me before I came of age. My father was released by him, and our family enjoyed a rare period of peace. Mother's family lived in a small border village, and father began planning to take mother and me there to live. But Guosheng's men watched our house every day, and we couldn't find a chance to leave. Just as father was at a loss, he received a letter from the estate of Earl Ningyuan. A month earlier, while praying for blessings at Wanan Temple, I had encountered Mama Zhao, who was out visiting relatives. When she saw me, she was so startled that she twisted her ankle. I helped her to the pavilion, where she tremblingly touched my warm hand and looked at me in disbelief. Miss, how have you come back to life? You must have mistaken me for someone else. Mama, noticing the token at her waist, I said, so you're from the estate of Earl Ningyuan. Actually, our family is somewhat related to the Earl's household. Mama Zhao snapped back to reality, asked for my name, and hurried back to the capital. By the time father received the letter, the carriage from the estate of Earl Ningyuan had already left the capital. They still set their sights on Mayor. Mother threw the letter into the stove fire, composed herself, and said to father, perhaps we should flee overnight. Mother gave her gold bracelet to father, but when he went to the pawn shop, he was spotted by Guosheng's men. Guosheng abducted me to his residence, threatening to kill my parents if I ever dared to think of escaping again. Although my family held no power or influence, we were considered a collateral branch of the estate of Earl Ningyuan. The Earl's household was already on their way to bring me to the capital for the imperial selection. I whispered to remind him, your father is merely a prefect, likely unable to offend the Earl's household. With the backing of the estate of Earl Ningyuan, my words carried weight. He stared at me with a sinister smile. If you're no longer a virgin and cannot participate in the imperial selection, will the Earl's household still support you? As he spoke, he rushed over and pinned me against the table. Outside the door, Prefect Guo's shouts could be heard. Guosheng, you must not touch her. She's an imperial candidate being sent to the palace by the Earl's household. You unfilial son, if you lay a hand on her, our family will be doomed. Don't be such a fool. Prefect Guo pounded violently on the door. Guosheng acted as if he heard nothing, still tearing at my clothes. He undid his belt. His foul breath sprang against my cheek. Soon, you'll be mine. Men truly are creatures ruled by their lower instincts. In his moment of dazed passion, I reached for the dagger hidden at my waist and thrust it fiercely into his neck. Foul, smelling blood splattered across my face. Gritting through the revulsion, I stabbed several more times until I saw him breathe his last. Prefect Guo pushed open the door, saw his son lying in a pool of blood, and fainted on the spot. After washing the bloodstains from my body, I resumed my usual gentle demeanor when meeting the people from the estate of Earl Ningyuan. I said, I am willing to enter the capital for the imperial selection. However, since Prefect Guo's son died because of me, they must ensure my parents are well taken care of. Father and mother received a large sum of silver and were arranged to leave the next day. On the eve of our parting, mother held me, weeping uncontrollably. They say the palace is a place that devours people without spitting out their bones. Your aunt's favor was merely a facade of glory, or she wouldn't have perished so young. Why must you leap into such an abyss? Of course, I knew everything mother was saying, because in my past life, I was Song Yao, who died tragically in the depths of the palace. I patted mother's back and comforted her in a soft voice. But if I don't enter the palace, our entire family won't survive. I'd rather die than bring harm to you. Father and mother. Hearing this, father silently wiped away tears in the corner. In my previous life, my relatives treated me with cold indifference. Never did I expect that, in this life, I would be cherished so dearly by my parents. It makes this lifetime worth living. I boarded the carriage bound for the capital. While father and mother set sail away from Huainan, I heard that the primary mother of the estate was quite pleased upon seeing my portrait. Mama Zhao told her that even my temperament was as gentle as Song Yao's. If they were looking for a stand-in for Song Yao, there probably isn't a better choice in this world than me. Before I even reached the capital, rumors began to spread that the estate of Earl Ningyuan was about to produce another noble consort. However, these rumors were suppressed before they could gain much traction. Soon, news came from the palace. Due to a severe drought in the north, leaving vast lands barren, Your Majesty decreed the cancellation of this year's imperial selection to raise funds for disaster relief. The northern drought had persisted for over 2 months, yet the selection was called off precisely at this time. There was no need to guess whose handiwork this was. The capital was abuzz with talk of the empress leading by example in frugality, hailed as a model of virtue. Who would have thought that even after 16 years, she still feared me so much? However, I had long anticipated that she wouldn't let me enter the palace easily. After arriving in the capital, the estate of Earl Ningyuan began scheming to thrust me into Shunya's sight. They hired musicians to teach me music and dance. It seems the path I walked in my previous life is one I must tread again. But they didn't realize how much the Empress dreaded this face of mine, identical to Song Yao's. Their actions would only hasten my demise. Fortunately, entering the palace for the selection wasn't my only option. I went to the drunken pavilion wearing a veil. The assassin sent by the Empress followed me right into the tavern. He poisoned my tea, but waited in vain for the toxins to take effect. Growing impatient, the assassin disguised himself as a waiter and brought in a plate of pastries. As he drew his dagger, I flung the scented powder I held in my hand toward him and dashed toward the corridor. In my panic, I stumbled and knocked over a standing screen in the corner. I knelt on the ground, lifted my head with my hands braced against the floor. Before I could regain my composure, a flash of silver suddenly pressed against my throat, the cold blade grazing my skin. My veil was flicked away by the swordsman's blade. I looked up at the nobleman before me, tears welling in my eyes, and said, "Someone is trying to kill me. Please save me, my lord." He looked down at me, a flicker of admiration in his eyes, and said to his guard, "Do not harm her." The pressure on my neck eased as the cold blade withdrew, leaving a faint trace of blood. The richly dressed man took 2 steps forward, while his guard whispered a warning. "Your Highness, be careful. She might be an assassin." Ignoring the warning, he stepped forward and helped me up, his gaze falling upon a jade pendant at my waist. "Do you remember me? When I got lost at Chonghua Temple as a child, you were the one who saved me." I froze for a moment, my expression showing surprise. He just called you, Your Highness." Shun Huaiyan revealed his identity to me, telling me he was the crown prince of the current dynasty. How could I not know who he was? The Empress's birth mother's memorial tablet is enshrined at Chonghua Temple, and she visits annually to pay respects. 8 years ago, when Shun Huaiyan got lost in the temple, I recognized his identity just by the fabric of his clothes and the scar on his arm. I lured him into a hunter's trap with a rabbit, then saved him when he was at his most helpless. After rescuing him, I casually mentioned how beautiful the jade inlaid in his hat was. He then gave me that piece of jade with the auspicious cloud pattern. Shen Huaiyan asked me softly, "I remember your name is Yunmei." I lowered my gaze, avoiding his intense stare. "Your Highness still remembers." His eyes remained fixed on me. "I once sent people to look for you." Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at him. If I hadn't met your Highness today, I'm afraid I would have. Prince Huaiyan held my hand, his gaze deepening. "With me here, no one in the capital dares touch you." I shyly lowered my eyes, my smile not reaching them. Years ago, I schemed to save him, solely to secure my own life in the future. Little did I expect he would remember me for so many years. Quite the romantic, saving me the need for any love potion. Prince Huaiyan settled me in his private residence, assigning guards to protect me. Under his protection, The empress could no longer act rashly against me. Prince Huaiyan asked me to be with him and move into the Eastern Palace. I agreed, requesting the status of a concubine. As the crown prince's consort had already been chosen as the first daughter of the prime minister, he felt the concubine position was beneath me and filled my courtyard with rare treasures from his palace. Among them was a hairpin adorned with a pearl from the east, which I adored and wore to the prime minister's mid-autumn festival banquet. The estate of Earl Ningyuan meticulously arranged for me to appear before Shen Yi on this occasion. However, Shen Yi never showed up, and I was seated in the most inconspicuous corner of the banquet. As dusk deepened, the noble ladies around suddenly noticed that the pearl on my hairpin began to emit a soft, lustrous glow. It was actually a luminous pearl. How extravagant it was to inlay such a large luminous pearl into a hairpin. How could a lone girl from the countryside like me be worthy of such a treasure? After that night, rumors began to spread like wildfire. They all said I was shameless, that I had climbed into the bed of some powerful noble in the capital. In an instant, my reputation was utterly destroyed. To prevent me from marrying into the Eastern Palace, the Empress went so far as to threaten suicide, forcing Prince Huaiyan to sever all ties with me. I dug my nails hard into my palm, looking at Prince Huaiyan through tear-blurred eyes. Now that my reputation is ruined, if your highness abandons me too, I truly have no way to survive. But I cannot disregard my mother. Prince Huaiyan showed a pained expression and spoke hoarsely. Yunmei, I will arrange everything for you, ensuring you live worry-free for the rest of your life. I wiped the tears that overflowed from the corners of my eyes, placed my hands together before my brow, and bowed respectfully to him. Yunmei would never put your highness in a difficult position. Upon hearing this, Prince Huaiyan turned and left. He hadn't gone far when a scream echoed from behind him. He heard the maid shriek, Miss has taken her own life." Prince Huaiyan stumbled as he rushed into my room. He snatched the sword from the guard's hand, its blade flashing before my eyes as the taut white silk snapped in two. I fell into Prince Huaiyan's embrace. His eyes red-rimmed. He looked at me. How could you do something so foolish? Tears welled in my eyes. Only through my death can I avoid bringing trouble upon your highness. He held me tightly, and I could feel him trembling. He was afraid. After a long while, he released me, staring at the red mark on my neck, and spoke. Yunmei, I will take you to see my father and beg him to allow you to become my crown princess. To ask Shen Yi for my status? This is getting more and more interesting. Will your majesty agree? You are the woman I truly love. Father will grant my request. As night fell, Prince Huaiyan brought me into the palace. I changed into a pink, purple dress and applied heavier makeup. Prince Huaiyan helped me down from the carriage, his eyes darkening. Why are you dressed so glamorously? I thought, since we're meeting His Majesty, I shouldn't dress too plainly. I looked up and asked softly, Does your highness not like it? He smiled. I like you no matter how you look. Prince Huaiyan held my hand as we walked along the palace path. Passing palace servants glanced up and turned pale with fright. Trembling whispers continuously reached my ears. Noble consort row. It's noble consort row. I wore a veil and turned to ask Prince Huaiyan, Didn't noble consort row die long ago? Why do I still hear her name in the palace? Prince Huaiyan's smile turned mocking. That madwoman nearly killed my mother and me, yet father still remembers her, and even had priests summon her spirit. That's why they say this palace is haunted. As he spoke, he wrapped his arm around my shoulder. Are you afraid? I shook my head. In my previous life, when I died, Shen Huaiyan was only 2 years old. It seems he truly remembers nothing. I was led by Shen Huaiyan into the imperial study. Shen Yi was reviewing memorials. Now, nearing 40, he hadn't aged much, showing little change compared to 16 years ago. Shen Huaiyan knelt with me to pay respects, but Shen Yi didn't even glance up. What brings you here so late? Shen Huaiyan spoke respectfully. Your son has found a woman he loves and wishes to present her to you, hoping for your blessing. Shen Yi rubbed his temples. It's just taking a concubine. You can decide that yourself. Father, I don't want to marry the Prime Minister's first daughter. I only wish to take Song Mei as my wife. Shen Yi threw down the memorial in his hand, his face suddenly darkening. Nonsense. Shen Huayan quickly bowed and knelt on the ground. Forgive me, Father Emperor. I quickly followed suit, kneeling down as well. The surroundings fell into an abrupt silence, time seeming to freeze. So quiet you could hear a pin drop. After what felt like an eternity, I finally heard Shen Ye's voice above me. Lift your head and let me see you. His tone was cold and stern, yet I could still detect a slight tremble in his voice. With my eyes lowered, I slowly raised my head. The elderly eunuch beside Shen Yi sharply commanded, "How dare you? You cannot remain veiled before His Majesty." The moment I removed the veil from my face, I heard the old eunuch gasp sharply and Shen Ye's heavy breathing. He stepped closer to me, one step at a time. With my head bowed, the light before me suddenly dimmed. By then, Prince Huayan had also noticed the unusual way Shen Yi was looking at me. He asked in confusion, "What is wrong, Father?" In the next instant, Shen Ye's hand clamped tightly around my neck. "Speak, who sent you? What alterations have been made to your face? Why do you look exactly like her?" He glared at me with eyes wide with fury, as if he truly wanted to kill me. My back pressed against the large pillar. My hands struggled to rest on the back of his. I looked at him in panic. The corners of my eyes flushed red. Shen Ye's grip gradually loosened. Prince Huayan was stunned by the scene before him. "Father, Yun Mei is not an assassin. She truly isn't." Shen Yi finally released me. He gazed intently at me as I sat, slumped on the ground, speaking coldly to Prince Huayan. "You cannot marry her, nor can you take her away. But, get out." The veins at Shen Ye's temples bulged, his anger uncontrollable. Prince Huayan had probably never seen him so enraged before. He scrambled away in a panic. I was taken by the palace attendants to a side hall. Several mamas came in to bathe and dress me. They meticulously examined every inch of my body, confirming that my appearance was not the result of disguise. By now, they must have quickly uncovered my connection to the estate of Earl Ningyuan. Song Yao and I are blood relatives, so it's not surprising we share the same face. If there's any stain on my record, it would be the killing of Guosheng. However, by the time I entered the capital, the people from the estate of Earl Ningyuan had already poisoned Prefect Gua, erasing this sole blemish. It wasn't until late at night that Shen Yi finally appeared. He stood at the doorway, his body rigid, as he stared at me for a long while before slowly approaching. Seeing him, I shrank back into the corner of the bed. "No, please don't kill me." His gaze softened, and he lowered his voice. "You look so much like a Yao. I was startled earlier. Your Majesty means my aunt." I lifted my eyes and timidly asked, "Everyone says I look just like my aunt. Could even your Majesty not tell us apart?" Shen Yi sat by the bedside, looking at me, and asked with a light laugh, "Did the estate of Earl Ningyuan bring you to the capital for the imperial selection?" I nodded. The smile in his eyes suddenly froze. "My imperial selection was cancelled, so you latched onto the crown prince instead?" Even though he was the one who cancelled the selection, he made it sound like it was my fault. I took a deep breath and spoke slowly. "Someone wants to kill me. Staying by the crown prince's side is the only way I can survive." A cold, murderous intent flashed in Shen Ye's eyes. "Who wants to kill you?" "I don't know." My entire body trembled uncontrollably, like a frightened kitten, my voice shaking as I said, "I only remember that the assassin had a burn scar on the back of his hand." Shen Yi pulled me into his embrace. "Don't worry, I will protect you. With me here, no one can harm you in the slightest." I looked up at him with red, rimmed eyes. The people at the manor said that if I entered the palace, I could be favored like my aunt, but I don't want favor. I just want to live peacefully. The bruises on my neck from where he had choked me had already been treated with medicine by the attending mama. He looked at the faint red marks, seemingly feeling some regret. "Does it still hurt?" I steadied myself and replied softly, "It doesn't hurt anymore. Your Majesty, could you please spare my life? In your eyes, am I a bloodthirsty tyrant who kills without blinking?" He chuckled softly, his voice softening. Stay by my side, and not only will you live well, but I can give you anything you desire. I shook my head. I don't want anything. Shinye's dark eyes gradually filled with desire, his last shred of reason seeming to crumble in an instant. He was already moved with passion, lowering his head to kiss me. Most of the candles in the hall had gone out, their dim light flickering in the gloom. When I came to my senses, I was already pinned beneath Shinyi on the bed. A warm teardrop fell onto my collarbone. I heard Shunye's voice grow hoarse. Yao, I never expected you to return, that you would come back. I said the same words as in my past life. Even the tone and expression were identical. How could he not mistake me for Song Yao? In my past life, I became Shun Ye's favored consort when my first love blossomed. Back then, I wanted nothing else, only hoping to have a place in his heart. In this lifetime, I want nothing else either. I only want your life. After a night of favor, I was conferred the title of Consort Shu. The news caused an uproar throughout the 6 palaces. After all, it was unprecedented for someone like me, without noble background, to be directly appointed as a consort upon entering the palace. I enjoyed exclusive favor from the moment I entered the palace, staying in Shanye's side chamber for 3 days before moving to my main residence. In the morning, I went to the Empress's palace to pay my respects. Amidst curling incense smoke, the Empress sat upright on her phoenix throne. The moment she saw me, her nails dug into the gilded armrests. I bowed respectfully to her while discreetly observing her with my eyes. She had changed from before, once aloof and virtuous, always claiming to disdain using beauty to please others. Now, her face was heavily powdered and her makeup much more vivid. Noticing the cracked porcelain, like makeup on her right cheek, I suppressed a cold sneer in my eyes. It turns out that my final stab before death had disfigured her face. Her eyes were bloodshot with rage, yet she had to maintain the virtuous demeanor expected of the central palace. You truly share your aunt's stunning beauty. No wonder His Majesty favors you. The surrounding consorts covered their lips with mocking laughter. Just a stand in for noble consort row. What is there to be proud of? I heard she hails from a remote countryside, her background even inferior to that of a second daughter from an ordinary family in the capital. But who can deny she has a pretty face? The Empress raised a slender eyebrow as she looked at me. These words were undoubtedly spoken to me at her behest. She wanted me to understand that in Shunye's eyes, I was merely a substitute. How laughable! Who among those present is in a stand? And some can dance the same steps, others play the same tunes, and some resemble her in appearance or temperament. Yet, among all the consorts in the rear palace, I am likely the least bothered by being seen as a replacement. I lowered my gaze with a faint smile. Indeed, with this face resembling my aunt's, I entered the palace and received your Majesty's favor. Truly, fate has been kind to me. The Empress's expression turned grim. Then, a foolish consort spoke up at that moment. I've heard that Consort Shu was rather restless before entering the palace, climbing her way up the social ladder. Only after speaking did she notice the Empress sitting high above, her face pale as death, the thick powder on her cheeks looking like a layer of dust. The high branch I climbed before entering the palace was none other than the Empress's own son, the current crown prince. To put it plainly, I was essentially taken by Shenyi from his own son. I heard that after that night, Prince Huayan fell ill and hasn't paid his respects to Shenyi for several days. If this continues, I wonder if the crown prince position, which the Empress schemed so hard to secure for Prince Huayan, will remain stable. I sat upright, calmly gazing at the Empress. Noble lady, Li has spoken nonsense. Will your Majesty not deal with her? The Empress narrowed her eyes slightly as she looked at me. What does Consort Shu think should be done with her? I set down my teacup and said gently, drag her out and give her 30 lashes, so she can never speak again. Upon hearing this, noble lady Li's legs gave way, nearly collapsing from her chair. The Empress sneered. I never realized you could be so ruthless. I curled my lips in a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I'm not as gentle, natured as you, and, indeed, I am somewhat ruthless. However, the Empress wasn't as merciless as I. She merely had noble Lady Li taken away and slapped 30 times. By the time I left, noble Lady Li's fair face was already red and swollen. The one who had been so arrogant moments ago now had her hair disheveled. Truly a pitiful sight. She still seemed unrepentant. Glaring up at me, I walked up to her and raised my hand to deliver a sharp slap. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, splattering onto the brick floor. I looked down at her from above. If you dare look at me like that again, it won't just be a slap next time. After throwing down these words, I cast a cold glance at the concubine not far away and turned to leave. No sooner had I gained favor than my arrogant reputation spread throughout the harem, making me the object of envy for all the consorts. Since that's the case, I might as well fully live up to my vicious reputation. After teaching Lady Li a lesson today, no one dared to provoke me anymore, giving me some peace and quiet. Shen Yi was busy with state affairs, yet he constantly wanted to see me. At lunchtime, he summoned me to join him for the meal. Why bother getting angry with Lady Li? If you don't like her, I'll simply send her away. Lady Li claimed I was improper before entering the palace. Since I belong to your majesty, how could I allow her to speak recklessly? That's why I punished her, putting down my chopsticks. I looked at him with a hurt expression. I wonder how this matter sounded when it reached your majesty's ears. Xinye's eyes turned cold. I know your nature, so I didn't believe what the Empress said about you. I curled my lips. It seems Her Majesty the Empress has taken a dislike to me. Xinyi let out a cold snort, and a shadow guard emerged from the shadows. Repeat what you just said. The shadow guard bowed respectfully. I have confirmed that the assassins who attempted to kill Consort Shu that day were death warriors under the Duke's command. Xinyi waved his hand, and the shadow guard retreated. I looked at him with confusion. Why would the Duke? Xinyi said. The Duke's estate is the Empress's maternal family. My entire body trembled uncontrollably. Her Majesty the Empress wants me dead? Your resemblance to your aunt is striking, inevitably arousing the Empress's jealousy. Xinye's gaze sharpened like a blade, his lips curling into a mocking smile. It seems my Empress is far less virtuous than she appears. I've always feared death, and now my face was drained of all color. My whole body shook uncontrollably. So, even before I entered the palace, the Empress wanted me dead. Xinyi gripped my hand tightly. With me here, no one can harm you. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at him. Will I meet a tragic end in the palace? Your Majesty? Xinye's hand trembled violently, likely recalling my miserable death in my previous life. He held me close in his embrace. No, such a thing will never happen again. Xinyi seemed even more fearful of the schemes in the harem than I was. This morning, after I paid my respects to the Empress, she bestowed many gifts upon me. Xinyi accompanied me back to my bedchamber and had someone inspect each of the items the Empress had given. Soon, they discovered poison in a box of tribute lip rouge. The imperial physician testing for poison said, although the amount of poison in this lip rouge is small, if Consort Shu uses it day after day, she will soon die suddenly from a surge of blood and energy. Terrified, I collapsed onto the soft couch, murmuring in despair. What have I done to offend her? Is it just because I look like my aunt? Xinyi stared grimly at the box of lip rouge in the imperial physician's hand, his face growing paler by the moment. I suddenly grabbed his arm and spoke urgently. Your Majesty, yesterday in the imperial garden, I encountered a deranged cleaning mama who rushed up to me calling me young mistress. She said that nothing in the palace should be touched, or one would lose their sanity. I originally thought she was speaking nonsense, but now it seems there might be some truth to her words. Upon hearing this, all color drained from Xinye's face, his sharp black eyes seeming to lose their focus. Only after a long while did he speak hoarsely. Go, find the person Consort Shu mentioned. Soon, Hong was brought into the bedchamber. In my previous life, she grew up with me and entered the palace as my personal maid when I married. Before I lost my sanity, anticipating I would fall out of favor. I released her from palace service to marry. She worried that no one would take good care of me after she left. So, when I was not fully conscious, she deceived me by saying she was a newly assigned palace maid and stayed by my side. After my death, she was sent to do hard labor. At that time, the entire harem was under the Empress's control, and the guards, knowing she had been my chief maid, subjected her to constant humiliation. Hong is only 30 for this year, but she already has many gray hairs. Yesterday, I encountered her cleaning the ditches in the Imperial Garden. Only then did I realize that this foolish girl had sacrificed the rest of her life to care for me. Hong looked up at me, her eyes immediately reddening. Prompted by a eunuch, she snapped back to reality and knelt to pay her respects. Shen Yi narrowed his eyes as he examined her. I recall you used to serve noble consort Ro. How did you end up doing hard labor? This humble servant was noble consort Ro's personal maid. Hong replied with downcast eyes. It seems someone in the palace harbors deep hatred for the noble consort, and even after her passing, they go to great lengths to humiliate those close to her. Shen Yi continued to ask, why did you say those words to consort Shu yesterday? Hong knelt on the ground, looking at me, tears continuously streaming from the corners of her eyes. All these years, this servant has thought every day. After the miscarriage, noble consort was merely overwhelmed with sorrow. So, how could she suddenly suffer from nightmares night after night until she lost her sanity? Your Majesty visited daily to dine with her, so surely no one would dare tamper with her meals. Thus, the only possibility was that something was done to the items she used regularly. Yesterday, when this servant saw consort Shu, it felt as if I were seeing the noble consort again. I feared she might be harmed once more, which is why I spoke those words. She repeated exactly what I had taught her to say yesterday, word for word. Shen Yi turned to the eunuch beside him. The items from the noble consort's palace. The eunuch hastily replied. The Empress said that seeing them would only make your Majesty grieve. So she ordered the palace staff to discard them all. Only a few items that your Majesty kept remain. Shen Yi stared coldly at the box of lip rouge on the desk and suddenly sneered. I suppose they must have drugged the items used by the noble consort as well. Hong seemed to recall something and kowtowed forcefully. This servant remembers now, after noble consort's miscarriage. The scent of the balm she applied daily seemed different. I asked the Imperial Household Department about it at the time, and they said it was because rose extract had been added to the balm. I didn't think much of it then. Shen Yi closed his eyes and said, investigate. The death of noble consort Ro was a taboo subject for Shen Yi, and no one in the palace dared mention it. Using a box of lip rouge that I had drugged myself, I successfully brought this old case to light. However, the Duke had once saved Shen Ye's life, and was also his foremost supporter in ascending the throne. Out of gratitude for the Duke's kindness, and to avoid being labeled ungrateful, Shen Yi preserved the Empress's position, but confined her to the Empress's palace. In my previous life, my life was only worth the Empress's confinement, and Hong felt it was unjust for me. Yet, this was the outcome I had desired. Because of that stab before my death, I ruined the appearance she cared about most, causing Shen Yi to despise her for 16 years. Now, the position of Empress she gained through her maternal family's influence has become an empty shell. The harem has always worshipped the rising sun. This noble Empress must fall from her heights into the dust to truly understand what humiliation means. What's the point in dying and being done with it all? I must keep her alive so I can collect the debts from my previous life. Bit by bit, incense smoke curled from the burner as slanting rays of sunlight filtered through the window lattice. I sat before the dressing table, combing my hair, when Hong entered carrying a tray of pastries. If my former self had lived, this would have been the quiet, lonely life Hong and I would have shared, having lived 2 lifetimes. Hong has returned to serve by my side once more, though now everyone calls her Mama Hong, and the innocence in her eyes is gone. The Empress is protesting her innocence, claiming she didn't poison the young lady's lip rouge. What did His Majesty say? Your Majesty naturally didn't believe it, saying the young lady was too young to possess such deep cunning. Hong paused, then added that now the Empress has stopped demanding to see His Majesty, likely wanting him to remember her beautiful appearance. I raised an eyebrow slightly. So, her face is completely ruined? Hong nodded. Over these years of His Majesty's neglect, she thought it was because of the scar on her face. Hence, all her desperate attempts to fix it. Now, she won't need to struggle anymore. Flipping through the account books, I asked without looking up, has anyone visited her recently? The Crown Prince begged for His Majesty's permission and visited her yesterday. I heard he brought the Empress some healing ointment. I smiled. I'd almost forgotten. She still has the Crown Prince to pin her hopes on. The Empress still cares so much about her appearance that even under house arrest, she has the Duke's family continuously send her priceless ointments and has the Crown Prince search far and wide for famous physicians. By the time they remembered me, I had already begun assisting and managing the 6 palaces using the accounting skills father taught me. Prince Huaiyan came looking for me several times, but I refused to see him. He still treats me with such deep affection, even giving up his position as Crown Prince, saying in his letter that he wants to elope with me, to leave this deep palace. On a quiet, deep night, I finally went to see him. He had changed into a guard's uniform, his eyes sunken, and he looked much more haggard overall. You are Father Emperor's woman now, aren't you? Prince Huaiyan looked at me and asked cautiously. You knew very well how much you resemble noble consort Ro. So, why did you come with me to the palace to see Father Emperor? Like Shen Yi, he had a pair of deeply affectionate eyes that could melt anyone. With reddened eyes, I feigned innocence and said, I wore a veil when I entered the palace, but I never imagined my face would look so much like my aunt's. His dark eyes grew profound. Mother Empress said it was you who framed her, that your approach to me was all a scheme, merely to avenge your aunt. I smiled bitterly and replied, when I first met your highness, I was only 8 years old. Could I have been scheming against you even then? Upon hearing this, Prince Huaiyan's expression softened slightly. I lifted my gaze, looking at him with eyes full of reproachful affection. It was all the Emperor's coercion. I never wanted to be trapped in this deep palace for life. Are you truly here to take me away, Your Highness? He asked me hoarsely. Yunmei, have you ever truly loved me? I smiled wryly. To be with you, Your Highness, I would even risk my life. As the Crown Prince, I bear too many burdens. Prince Huaiyan raised his hand to gently stroke my cheek. His eyes filled with infatuation and reluctance. Song Yunmei, you are after all the first woman I've ever loved. Yet I have no choice but to let you go. His rough palm caressed my neck tenderly. Before he could exert force, the golden hairpin in my hand plunged fiercely into his chest. Prince Huaiyan's pupils suddenly contracted. I looked up to meet his incredulous expression. How foolish do you think I am in your eyes? To believe in a man's sincerity once more? Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. You, the Empress, was right. My approach to you was all a calculated scheme. I leaned closer, whispering in a voice only we could hear. Your Highness, you don't know yet, but I've long planted spies in the Empress's palace. I knew full well that Shen Huaiyan, to preserve his position as Crown Prince and allow the Empress to regain power, had tearfully sworn to kill me. The moment I pulled out the golden hairpin, Shen Huaiyan instantly collapsed to the ground. I stepped back 2 paces, tore my dress with my hands, pinching red marks hard on my arm, and screamed, Help! Help me! The night patrol guards nearby quickly rushed over. When the torchlight illuminated Shen Huaiyan's face, everyone froze. The one who had molested the Emperor's favored consort in the night was none other than the current Crown Prince. Shen Yi soon arrived at my bedchamber. I knelt on the ground with my hairpins removed to ask for punishment. Faint bruises visible beneath my plain, white garment. My entire body trembled as I wept mournfully. Your servant did not know that man was the Crown Prince. I only thought to preserve my purity, and thus accidentally injured the Crown Prince. Shen Yi looked slightly stunned. Why were you out so late? Hong came forward holding a jade vial. Her ladyship, concerned about your Majesty's persistent cough, recalled a secret remedy from her hometown that required water collected from bamboo leaves at night. She spent 2 nights gathering just this one bottle, never expecting to encounter the crown prince tonight. Shinny helped me up, his eyes filled with compassion. Someone meant you harm. It's not your fault. Hearing this, I threw myself into his arms, tears streaming uncontrollably from my eyes. The crown prince threatened to ruin my virtue. I was so terrified, afraid that your majesty would cast me aside. Shinny lowered his head and kissed my forehead. How could I? Just then, a eunuch stumbled in frantically, his voice trembling with panic. Your majesty, the crown prince, his highness, has succumbed to his severe injuries. He has passed away. Shinny stiffened, and after a long moment, he spoke in a hoarse voice. He deserved it. Leaning against his chest, I curled my lips into a cold smile. To protect the palace's reputation, Shen Yi publicly declared that the crown prince had died from an accidental fall into the water. The empress naturally did not believe such an explanation, and soon uncovered the true cause of the crown prince's death. This only deepened her hatred, making her wish she could grind my bones to dust. Having managed the inner palace for years, even in her downfall, she still had many loyal followers. After dealing with several palace servants who attempted to assassinate me, I grew weary and went to the empress's palace to see her. By then, the right side of her face had completely rotted away, hidden only by her disheveled long hair. The once peerlessly elegant empress now appeared like a madwoman, her eyes, bloodshot, fixed on me with an intense glare. It's all because of you, you vile woman, who caused Yenner's death. How dare you come here? I adjusted the hairpin in my bun and smiled gently. This morning, feeling unwell, I summoned the imperial physician for a pulse reading. He informed me that I am with child. The empress's eyes brimmed with hatred, as if about to bleed. You came just to tell me that my son is gone, yet you carry one in your womb? The imperial physician reported to your majesty that I was 1 month pregnant, though in truth, my child was nearly 2 months along. I gently stroked my belly, lowered my gaze, and smiled. After the crown prince's passing, your majesty's cough worsened, and it took a full month to recover. She stared blankly at my abdomen and murmured in a daze, It's Yenner. Is this Yenner's child? I smiled faintly and said nothing. The empress raised her eyes to meet mine. Why are you telling me this? I raised an eyebrow lightly. I am famously fearful of death, so of course, I hope your highness will spare my life. The empress froze, the hidden shard of porcelain in her hand cutting her palm, blood trickling down her wrist. How laughable. Though she wished she could tear me apart, she couldn't bring herself to kill me. After all, the child in my womb was the only bloodline her son had left in this world. From then on, the empress no longer fixated on taking my life. With her pent-up rage finding no outlet, she finally remembered who she should truly hate. It was Shun Yi who, disregarding years of marital affection, imprisoned her in the empress's palace as cold as the abandoned quarters, subjecting her to utter humiliation. It was Shun Yi who, to seize another woman, rejected her son and let him die under mysterious circumstances. It was Shun Yi who brought her to this wretched state. Soon, she found an opportunity for revenge. As the border conflicts escalated, the court dispatched the capital's garrison to defend the frontier. The only forces left guarding the capital were the city garrison under her brother Xuefeng's command. Under the cover of night, the rebel army breached the palace gates and swiftly advanced to my bedchamber. Xuefeng, mounted on his horse, pointed his sword at me and ordered his subordinates, disfigure her face and take her away. But be gentle, don't disturb the lady's pregnancy. Standing my ground, I smiled faintly at him and said, I deceived the empress. The child in my womb is not Prince Huaiyan's, and the future throne will hold no place for the Xue family. What did you say? Xuefeng froze for a moment, then glared at me viciously. So what? All the princes in the palace are my elder sister's children. Since that's the case, there's no need to keep you alive. His eyes widened with rage as he raised his sword and charged at me. In an instant, a shower of arrows poured down. Xuefeng died pierced by countless arrows. I stared at his eyes that hadn't yet closed and smiled. Today's events were nothing but a trap set to catch the prey. The border had never actually requested reinforcements from the court. The moment the Empress began plotting rebellion, Shen Yi had already started setting his trap. I averted my gaze, pulled 2 pills from my waist, and swallowed them. Soon, blood slowly trickled down my thighs, soaking my skirt and dripping onto the brick floor. Panic screams came from the maids surrounding me. "It's terrible. Her Majesty is bleeding. Call the Imperial Physician. Quickly call the Imperial Physician." I collapsed to the ground, my vision blurred, as if through blood-stained glass. Before losing consciousness, I saw Shen Ye's face turn deathly pale as he stumbled toward me. Upon seeing the pool of blood beneath me, he suddenly coughed up blood from his heart. He had been longing for this child for far too long. He even told others that his and a Yao's child had returned. How could he say such a thing? In our previous life, the cold medicine he gave me damaged my health, causing the child to die in the womb. It was he who killed my child. The child could never return. After my miscarriage, Shen Yi fell seriously ill. His health completely collapsed after he forced himself to deal with the Duke's household. My own recovery was swift, and I attended to him daily by his bedside, serving his medicine. He grew increasingly trusting of me, not even avoiding me when discussing state affairs with ministers, and even asked which prince I thought should be made crown prince. I paused slightly and said, "Your Majesty, then appoint the 5th prince." He drank the medicine I fed him and asked, "Why?" I gently set down the medicine bowl. "His birth mother, Consorti, has a gentle and unassuming nature. If she were to manage the harem, our lives as consorts wouldn't be too difficult. I will have you raise the 5th prince and support you to become the Empress." I lower my gaze. "I am unwilling to raise another's child." He placed his hand over mine. "We will have children of our own in the future." I shook my head. "Childbirth is too painful. I do not wish to bear children anymore." Shen Yi looked at me with a dazed expression, but soon fell into a deep slumber. The next day, when he awoke, he registered the 5th prince under my name and issued an edict appointing him as crown prince. After my miscarriage, I was enfeoffed as noble consort, and now my appointment as empress is imminent. Such immense favor brought unparalleled glory to the estate of Earl Ningyuan in the capital, overshadowing all the nobles in the city. It also led to my good, for nothing brother from my previous life, spoiled by mother, causing several more scandals. When I went to visit Shen Yi, I brought up the matter of the estate of Earl Ningyuan. Earl Ningyuan was so jealous over a courtesan that it led to several deaths. So I ordered the Ministry of Justice to execute him. Shen Ye's expression turned cold. He was Ios' younger brother and the only son of the estate of Earl Ningyuan. I sneered. "Why keep such a beast who tarnishes my aunt's reputation?" Shen Yi closed his eyes. "You are too cruel-hearted. Indeed, still not comparable to Io. Your Majesty is right. I am indeed cruel-hearted." I asked him with a smile, "Did your Majesty hear the woman's screams last night?" He stared at me without speaking, and I continued on my own. "When your Majesty ordered the Empress's execution, she was already insane and incoherent. I didn't want her to die so ambiguously, so I switched the poison meant for her. She suffered for 2 full hours until her internal organs rotted away. Your Majesty, do you think she was conscious before dying in such agony?" Shen Ye's gaze at me grew increasingly unfamiliar. She had already endured enough humiliation. Why did you have to torment her like this? I sneered coldly. Because I hate her. And not only that, I hate you too. With just a fake pregnancy, I've made you this ill. It seems you've truly fallen for me. Your Majesty, you must keep your emotions calm, or you'll die from a surge of blood and rage. He realized what was happening, clutching his chest as he looked at me, his once loving eyes now filling with blood. "You poisoned me, you venomous woman. This poison was prepared for you before I even entered the palace." I lowered my gaze, wiping my hands as I smiled. "If not for the poison, why would your Majesty be so enraged that you fell gravely ill?" Blood continuously gushed from his mouth and nose. He tried to speak but could make no sound. I smiled. All the palace servants around have been sent away. Your Majesty should save your strength. Unable to speak, he could only listen to me. I recall, Your Majesty's greatest wish was to be buried with noble consort Ro after death, to be husband and wife with her in the next life. But yesterday, I had her and her child's bodies exhumed, their ashes scattered in the lake. You'll never meet again in any future life, but I shall bury you and the Empress together, so you may remain inseparable for all eternity. Shen Yi stared at me intently, coughing up a mouthful of dark blood. With his last ounce of strength, he uttered one final sentence. I was mistaken. You're not Io. She would never be so vicious. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. But I am her, Lord Yi. Shen Ye's fading pupils suddenly contracted sharply. In my previous life, during my first night serving the Emperor, I waited for him for what felt like an eternity. Through layers of silk curtains, I softly asked the indistinct figure I could barely make out. May I ask, my lord, will His Majesty be coming tonight? The person remained silent, so I inquired further. How should I address you, my lord? He replied, Yi. Lord Yi, may I ask? I lifted my gaze and saw Shen Yi, dressed in brilliant yellow robes, smiling at me. This matter was known only to the two of us. Before succumbing to the poison, Shen Yi finally recognized me. When the new emperor ascended the throne, everyone assumed I would become the Empress Dowager. Yet the palace announced that I had suddenly died from a severe illness. The new emperor's birth mother, Consort Yi, was honored as Empress Dowager. Before leaving the palace, I met with her one last time. I asked her with a smile, all the women in this palace hate me. Why don't you? She shook her head and said, perhaps because you look too much like Muyao, so I can't bring myself to hate you. I curved my lips into a smile and said, I haven't thanked you yet on behalf of my aunt for taking care of many of her close attendants after her death. Unfortunately, the maid Hong was closely watched, and I never had the chance to help her leave the palace. But now it's just as well. She can leave with you. She looked up and gazed at me, asking, are you really leaving just like this? Aren't you afraid of enemies seeking revenge? Enemies? All of mine are dead. I smiled at her and said, Mother didn't want me to spend my entire life confined within the deep palace walls, so I must leave. I left the capital with Hong. I told her that since I had a home now, she would have one too. In the tranquil, small mountain village, wisps of cooking smoke drifted with the wind. Father sat in the courtyard, clicking the abacus as he kept accounts. Mother set the dishes on the table and sighed to Father. I wonder if Meyer is suffering out there. When she looked up again, her movements froze. I stood at the gate of the courtyard, my eyes brimming with tears. Father, Mother, I'm back. The withered tree in the courtyard sprouted fresh green buds, while the wind scattered fallen blossoms across the steps. Father and Mother asked no questions. They simply said to me, it's good to have you back.